I know they say you can't choose your family, and that's unfortunate because sometimes some of the brightest among us, like Christopher Hitchens, wind up with some of the dimmest, such as his brother Peter, who is a Christian apologist. Therefore, I came across this part of a speech. Apparently he's stumping for some kind of a vote, and this is his part of the presentation, but wow, I wouldn't vote for this guy if it was a choice between him and a head of lettuce. Let me know what you think as we look at Peter Hitchens and his take on the existence of God.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I hate this argument. In fact, I loathe taking part in it almost more than any other argument I ever take part in.
And that's fine, trust me. Atheists hate taking part in the does God exist argument just as much as you do. Mostly because people like you have no actual argument to offer. You just have wishful thinking and endless emotionalizing and the cherry picking of evidence and entirely discredited philosophical claims that do not stand up to scrutiny. You people are just irrational, and we hate to deal with the irrational, but you don't offer us much choice because you people won't shut the hell up. So I guess we'll both have to suffer through this, won't we?
For why? Because I have to come up here and defend the religion of love, brotherhood, peace, justice, and turning the other cheek rather than kicking the other guy in the crotch. And I have to listen. I have to listen while I'm doing it to these gentlemen, who remind me constantly of the most irritating, infuriating, revolting person I ever knew, namely my adolescent self.
Oh, I'm sure you mean your brother, who was quite adept at kicking the ass of religion and making it look as absurd and ridiculous as possible. See, there is nothing loving or caring or positive about religion. It talks a good game, but in practice it is evil, hate-filled, ridiculous twaddle, wrapped up in a thin veneer of hope, but lacking any positive objective evidence that it is factually true whatsoever. Even your brother knew that, and here's what he had to say on the subject.
Now, I am absolutely convinced that the main source of hatred in the world is religion and organized religion. Absolutely convinced of it. And I think it should be religion treated with ridicule and hatred and contempt. And I claim that right.
So when I say, as the subtitle of my book, that I think religion poisons everything, I'm not just doing what publishers like and coming up with a provocative subtitle. I mean to say it infects us in our most basic integrity. It says we can't be moral without Big Brother, without a totalitarian permission. It means we can't be good to one another. It means we can't think without this. We must be afraid. We must also be forced to love someone who we fear. The essence of sadomasochism, the essence of abjection, the essence of the master-slave relationship, and that knows that death is coming and can't wait to bring it on. I say this is evil, and though I do some nights stay home, I enjoy more the nights when I go out and fight against this ultimate wickedness and ultimate stupidity.
Honestly, I mean, haven't we all heard it all before? Horus, Mithras, they're all the same. No, they're not all the same. They all disagree with each other. They must be wrong. They can't all be right. This is the stuff of sixth form debate.
Ah, so we already know what you're going to say. But yes, we have heard it all before. The pathetic philosophical claims, the irrational, illogical bleeding of unsupported arguments and wishful thinking, little more than an emotional security blanket for people too weak-willed and weak-minded to stand on their own two intellectual feet. Yes, it is the stuff of childishness. Why won't you theists stop it?
There has been nothing serious said against the concept of God by the opposition this evening at all. I am expecting something serious to come from the third speaker, but there hasn't been anything so far. I'm really hoping, because it would be nice.
Now hold on for a second. You have it entirely backwards. It isn't the job of the doubters to prove that God doesn't exist. It's the job of the believers to prove that he does. It is always the responsibility of the positive claimant, in this case, the person that claims that something is real, to back it up with evidence and well-reasoned arguments. When do you think you're going to be getting around to that?
Because this is not fundamentally a serious discussion as it has been held so far from the other side. And it's not serious for a very simple reason. It's not arguing about what we ought to be arguing about. I'm going to have a little bit of poetry here for those of you who appreciate that sort of thing. It's from the 38th chapter of the book of Job. God speaks from the whirlwind, and he asks, "Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof?" The answer, ladies and gentlemen, from the opposition is they haven't a clue.
First off, that's not really poetry, but that's really beside the point, isn't it? Those are just empty claims, presented without evidence, read from an ancient book of Bronze Age mythology, which Hitchens is asserting is true, but which he has in no way actually demonstrated. And then he pretends that he's got the upper hand, saying the opposition doesn't have a clue what happened, implying that somehow he does. But that's really the problem, because he cannot show that he has any more of a clue than he claims his detractors do. He only has a book that makes claims. He has no actual evidence that shows that this book is actually valid or correct, or that the people who wrote the book had the slightest idea what the hell they were writing about. Faith in the apologist's mind apparently covers all failures, but not in reality. No matter how much faith a creationist has in his beliefs, those beliefs are factually false, unsupported by evidence, filled with absurdity, and completely failing to meet observations in the real world. That's why creationism has been soundly rejected across the board by anyone with a rational mind, because it doesn't meet the criteria of an intellectual pursuit. The same, whether they like it or not, is true of all religious claims. Just asserting that something is true because you really want it to be true, that doesn't make it actually true. That requires more than faith, and that's apparently something that no apologist actually has.
Nor have I. Nor has anybody in this room. We haven't the faintest idea. Nothing that any of us could say here tonight could convince anybody that they knew that God existed. What we are discussing here is a matter of opinion.
No, we're not. That's not how real questions in the real world are addressed. Isaac Newton didn't have the proverbial apple fall on his head and then decide there was gravity because that was his opinion. That isn't how science works. We don't just pull things out of our asses and say, "Hey, it sounds good to me, let's go with it." That's just not how it works.
Mr. President, is a matter of choice. And the real question before us is why we choose what we choose.
No, it's not. You act like this is choosing a flavor of ice cream. There's a difference between making a personal choice and making a claim about the fundamental nature of the universe. The universe operates the way that it operates. Your opinion about how it operates is either correct or it's incorrect. We have, so far, only shown a single method that produces demonstrably proper results in finding out how the universe actually operates, and that method is science. Just believing whatever the hell you want to believe has never produced good results. Peter, you're just completely and totally wrong.
And this is the most fascinating part of the argument, addressed by the most intelligent and interesting atheist, I think now living, Thomas Nagel, who asks repeatedly, why is it that I and my fellow atheists so much want there not to be a God? Why is it, ladies and gentlemen, they so much want there not to be a God? Why would you want there not to be a God? Why would you want to live in a purposeless chaos in which none of your actions had any significance, in which there was no hope of justice, in which the lives of all those whom you loved ended abruptly at death and had no further significance? Why would you want, desire, actively wish to live in a universe as disgusting as that?
That's a ridiculous claim to make. It doesn't matter what kind of universe we want to live in. It only matters what kind of universe we actually live in. And so far as we can tell, so far as the objective evidence that we actually have shows us, there's simply no reason to think that any gods of any kind actually exist in reality. See, What Hitchens is doing here is appealing to the logically fallacious argument from consequences. To go back to something I said earlier, what if Newton had said that he's very unhappy with the idea of gravity? After all, if you fall off the top of a tall building, you're going to plummet to your death, and that's a bad consequence. Therefore, maybe Newton wanted to reject the idea of gravity because of the potential consequences thereof. Of course, it doesn't stop gravity from existing. You're not going to fall off the building and magically float away, and your opinions mean absolutely nothing when it comes to what's actually true in reality. This is yet another patently irrational apologist ploy that anyone with half a clue ought to immediately see through.
You'd have to have a very good reason. And I think these gentlemen do have a very good reason, and it's what they never ever wish to discuss. They don't want justice. They do want the dead to be dead. They do want the universe to be purposeless. They do not want their own individual actions to have any other significance than their immediate effect. You will have to discuss with them why they should be so keen on that proposition.
Neither their desires nor yours has anything to do with reality. If the dead are really dead, then they're really dead. All the wishes and dreams and desires in the world won't change that. That's why this is so absurdly ridiculous. You don't have a choice in the kind of universe you inhabit. You simply do. And this is part of the basic maturation process that you have to come to grips with the way that things actually are, instead of the way that you desperately wish they were. Something tells me that Peter Hitchens has yet to reach that level of maturity.
But from our side of the argument, what we say is that if we desire justice for ourselves, we also desire it for other people. And likewise, if we desire it for other people, we require it for ourselves and we bring it upon ourselves. And on the basis of that, we construct, with some difficulty, with a certain amount of historical knowledge, in the case of some of us with an enormous amount of scientific knowledge of the universe, we construct a belief which helps us to discover, insofar as it is possible, what it is we ought to do and how it is we ought to live, in the belief that there is justice, that there is hope, that death is not the end, that our actions have a significance beyond what we immediately do.
And how the hell does any of that get you to the factual existence of God? It really sounds like he's advocating just making something up because it makes him feel better about something he really wishes were true, even if there's no real reason to think that it actually is. He wants there to be justice, so he makes up an imaginary divine justice maker because it's easier than actually working to bring about justice in the real world. He doesn't want the world to be meaningless, so he invents a make-believe deity out of whole cloth to give supposed meaning to the universe so he doesn't have to feel bad. Does anyone else see where this is just utterly ridiculous?
That really is what we are discussing. Do you want it? Or do you not want it? If you don't want it, then you can simply turn with raillery and badinage and mock the beliefs of others. I don't care to do that. I think atheists have a serious point of view. I understand why they seem so anxious to press it upon you. And I know, thanks to the general destruction and retreat of institutional Christianity in our society, that many people growing up feel under a great deal of conformist pressure because it is very fashionable to follow atheism at the moment. And I also know that a number of people who are in the end servants of power are quite anxious to dispel from our society the enormous force of restraint upon power which Christian belief provides.
Whoa, wait a minute. The enormous restraint upon power that Christian belief provides? Are you out of your ever-loving mind? Maybe you've heard of something called the Catholic Church. You know, the nation unto itself that wields an absurd amount of economic, political, and social power? Oh yeah, you're British. Not really a fan of Catholicism, but the Church of England is also a seat of tremendous power. The monarchy, that stupid thing that you people still cling to, still officially rests at the head of the Church of England. But no, it's all about restraint upon power. Tell us another one, Peter.
It's interesting that we had, he wasn't properly named, but Laplace quoted earlier on this evening as mocking the idea that he needed any such concept of God because he understood the universe perfectly without it. Quite why it stays up, I don't know, but he thought that he didn't need that explanation. Look up Laplace, some of you, and find out what an extremely nasty piece of work he was. I've no wonder he had no need for the concept of God, People like that don't, because God in our society stands very much against. And this is why I, after many, many years of not believing in God, came round to the view that I would choose to do so and act as if there is a God.
Hold on a minute. This is getting ridiculous. You cannot just choose to believe in a God. Your beliefs are not beholden to the will. They require conviction. You either believe or you do not believe. You can't just decide that this week you're going to believe and next week you won't. I'm really struggling to find anything that Peter Hitchens actually understands about the world, about humanity, about logic and reason. He just seems to be drifting around waving his arms and showing that he's really got nothing between his ears but a vacuum.
God is the principal opposition in our society to lawless, ruthless power. To the bully, to the autocrat, to the despot, to the criminal, to the person who treats his neighbors like dirt. Fundamentally, once we have dispensed with that concept in our society, we are left with nothing.
Apparently you know nothing about the history of religion either because, wow, just wow. How exactly could you have been Christopher Hitchens' brother and still be so utterly clueless about just about everything?
The atheists don't wish to discuss this because they know exactly what I'm saying. They're very well aware of the implications of what I'm saying for society in general. They know perfectly well that if everybody didn't believe in God, the comfortable lives they live in extremely agreeable suburbs, where they can trust people not to cheat them and rob them and mug them and rape them, would come to an end. They want to keep the secret to themselves. They want to have all the joys, not just now, all the joys and all the advantages provided by Christianity, but not pay the dues.
That's why the most secular nations out there are also the ones with the lowest crime rates, right? That's why religion, particularly Christianity in the West, but also true of most religions, are overrepresented in prisons as compared to their demographics in the outside world, while atheism is underrepresented. Again, he knows nothing of history and nothing of reality. He lives in this self-imposed bubble of ignorance and blindness. There are no bands of atheists running around murdering gays or theists, but that's certainly not true of the religious. There are no atheists trying to pass laws to prohibit equality for all, but the religious, that's common practice. By and large, atheism is about equality and freedom, and religion is about control and power. I know of no non-religious state that has ever passed laws prohibiting those who believe in a God from holding public office. But there's plenty of places where the religious have pulled that on atheists. The delusion is strong in this one.
No, not just now, because I'm just finishing. I normally do, but this evening I've decided not to. I've decided just to give them a Christian kicking. And
ah yes, there's that Christian love that he keeps talking about. It's sad what a complete and total dick Peter Hitchens really is.
And that is why, when you challenge the atheist side on this very point, they run from it, refusing to discuss it. That is why nobody ever answers Thomas Nagel's question. Why is it that they so much want there not to be a God? Well, I'll tell you exactly why. It's for precisely the same reasons as I very much want there to be one. Vote for the motion, please.
Anyone who would be swayed by this load of bollocks isn't very intelligent, as Peter Hitchens has demonstrated himself time and time again not to be. Wanting there to be a God, or not to be a God, has no bearing whatsoever on whether there actually is a God. Just like wishing there was a Santa Claus has no bearing on whether Santa Claus actually exists. He's acting like this is just a social invention, designed to make people feel good about themselves, and he's probably closer to the truth than he realizes. Atheists, by and large, don't give a damn what kind of ridiculous nonsense you believe, just so long as you don't harm anyone and you don't try to stop the world from improving. It isn't religion that makes the world better. Religion has historically impeded progress. I have no idea what proposition they're supposed to be voting on, but geez, I wouldn't trust this guy to represent anything. I can't imagine why he isn't a complete and total laughingstock to all of the British people. Wow, if I actually believed in that kind of thing, I'd say Christopher would be flopping around in his grave, totally embarrassed at the absurdity pushed by his brother. I know I certainly would be if I was in that position, which is probably laying down and decomposing at the moment. I really don't get how people can be that laughably wrong. It isn't like he's got some details wrong. It isn't like he's got some ideas wrong. It's that he's pretty much wrong on pretty much every single thing that comes out of his mouth, and it's like nobody has the balls to tell him that he's a putz. Too bad I wasn't there, because I'm not afraid to expose stupidity wherever it hides. So what do you think of Peter Hitchens? Please let me know in the comments. Have you run into someone as cocksure of utter nonsense as he seems to be? Tell us about it. Give me some feedback. Tell people about my channel. Spread the word. Let me know if there's anything you want me to take on. I'm easy.